Hello, welcome to the fifth episode of Born in Quarantine. Today, we're gonna dive deep into the seedy underbelly of every major city. A place where two guys named Rito and Joey Two Toes could walk around freely, maybe bust a knuckle or two, the usual stuff. Yeah. Today we're gonna talk about the most Italian Irishman the cinema has ever seen. I would love to say that I have like some Italian wine or maybe some gin in here, but the truth of the matter is I can't drink either because metabolism, so this is just cherry flavored water, but it looks like wine, so it counts for something. My relationship with gangster movies is somewhat like that stereotypical relationship of the disapproving father and the overachieving child. I can't tell you how many times I've been proven wrong in my misconception of a gangster movie before I watched it. I thought I would hate Hoffa. I absolutely loved it. I thought Bugsy would be boring. I loved it. I thought I hate STEM promises. It's a great movie. I loved every minute of it. I thought Gangster Squad is gonna be stupid. It was, but in a fun way. I like that also. Even in TV shows, I thought I'd hate Mob City. And now I'm mad that there isn't a second season. You'd think with the amount of gangster movies in some of my favorite movies of all times, I'd go a little easier on them, but no. I always think that I'm gonna hate the gangster movies, but I don't. I love them. I love a lot of them. I think part of the reason that I want to don't like them is I don't want to admit that I understand what they're talking about these unlawful citizens. But the fact of the matter is I do understand what they're talking about and I love what they're talking about. And gangster movies, like any other subgenre, has ups and downs in cinema history, but one of its ups came out recently and it was a grand extravaganza of gangster. You have Martin Scorsese, you have Robert De Niro, Al Pacino, Joe Pesci, Harvey Keitel, you have references to Don Rickles, you have this whole thing about Jimmy Hoffa, and you have all of them in 3.5 wonderful hours. I love The Irishman, if it isn't obvious. But before we get to that, let's talk about some gangster movies. I'm just gonna say it. I've put a little car here on the voice recorder, and I don't know if it can be seen from the camera, but yeah, it's the only gangster thing I have aside from the tire. So yeah. I think I use this comparison a lot, but that's because I'm very well versed in it. Gangster movies are kind of like westerns. They have their own universe. It seems real, it looks real, it feels real, but it's probably not. They have their own dialect, they have their own costumes, they have their own iconography, they have their own feels. You can spot a gangster movie just from watching it, is what I'm trying to say. And their universe is kind of interesting. You have this world of crime that everyone in it cannot be trusted, everyone in it can be dangerous, and yet there is this sense of safety in it. I don't know if I can explain it well. If you haven't seen gangster movies, it's kind of hard for me to get this across, but if you have, you've probably noticed that seemingly in this world, death is always following you, but at the same time, you're safe from it because you've been a loyal stand up guy. Stand Up Guy is another fun gangster movie. Not really good, but fun. So, yeah, everyone is Italian. You go over the pond, you have British gangsters, and they're all cockney and they all talk like that, and they all feed their victims to the pigs. And that was a horrible Cockney accent, I know. But the only accents I know are the ones that I'm talking about, and the Michael Caine accent. And a little bit of Sean Connery. Yeah. But I don't think there are gangsters that speak like Sean Connery. When Sean Connery played in a gangster movie, he played a cop. So yeah. So gangster movies living in their own pocket universe. Watching it throughout the history of the cinema, you realize that it is evolving. You have the 30s movies, the Scarface, Little Caesar, and people in them were lowlifes. They were these people that came from the street, didn't know anything, most of them were illiterate, and they wanted to appear better than they were, usually through crime. And 30s gangsters gave us this classical phrase, see. It might not seem classical until you realize most of the idea of how people talked in the 30s came from Little Caesar and the word see. Yeah, see, we're gonna do that, see.
Diamond Pete, Montana. He don't have to waste his time on cheap gas stations.
It's a gangster dialect, when somebody talk like that, we all think it's from the 30s because everyone in the 30s were gangsters apparently. Then you come forward. In the 50s and 60s, they all sort of died down, giving way to more noir stuff, which didn't really deal with gangsters, as in people that were in a gang and were part of the organized crime. They deal more with small-time criminals, crisscross, stuff like that. Then you get to the 70s, the big one, The Godfather. There are no words I can use to describe how much I love Godfather. I love every second of it. I would kill to make 1 minute of Godfather in my whole career. Yet it would be ignorant of me to address what Godfather did to gangsters. You see, gangsters were lowlifes. Most of them were. Al Capone was a lowlife. Not everybody was, Lucky Luciano and Meyer Lansky. But Godfather took these criminals and gave them a much grander persona. They were men of honor. They were Don Vito Corleone. They were criminals still. They cut off horses' heads. They blew up Michael's wife. Spoiler alert for a movie that came out in 1972. Yet they all have this aura of legitimacy. You could go to the Godfather and ask him for a favor. They were better than the police because the police was corrupt. Some truth to that. But you see what I mean when I say it made these criminals appear better. Suddenly Godfather was a godfather. He wasn't Vito Corleone, who came from Sicily, killed a bunch of people, and got power. He was the Godfather. I don't think I need to tell you how much of a success Godfather was and how much it influenced how people saw gangsters. And around that time, 70s, especially the 80s, you had what I want to call breaking Godfather image, which came from Sergio Leone's amazing Once Upon a Time in America and Martin Scorsese's movies, Goodfellas, Casino, Mean Streets. These movies were trying hard to get people to understand one thing. Gangsters are criminals. They don't live to die old and happy playing with their grandchildren like Don Vito Corleone. They are criminals. They live in a life of crime, a life of uncertainty, and death is always waiting for them. So yeah, there is this vision of gangsters that I think Sergio Leone, being an Italian, really tried to break the image, because the good guy in Once Upon a Time in America is Noodles, Robert De Niro, and he's the good guy, remember. The good guy rapes a girl because the girl didn't put out, because he thought it was his right to get what he wanted. He's the good guy. He's the one that we're rooting for. Because the other guy, James Woods, beats his girlfriend like a punching bag. These are gangsters. This is what gangsters' life was. This is mafia. Mafia isn't Don Corleone, do not talk about business at the dinner table. You don't respect me, you don't call me the Godfather. I can do a Marlon Brando impression. I'm not going to until the end. I probably will do one at the end of the video. So yeah, gangsters after the 80s were this combination of the Godfather, this figure of authority, and the lowlives who killed, murdered, raped because they wanted to and because they could. And that's what gets us to The Irishman. The amount of hype around Irishman was unimaginable. I mean, you have this great director of gangster movies, Martin Scorsese, coming back, working with Robert De Niro for the first time since The Casino, and Joe Pesci was coming out of retirement, and it was the first movie that Al Pacino and Martin Scorsese would do together, and the third movie that Al Pacino and Robert De Niro would do together. I mean, it's just amazing. It was going to be 3.5-hour movie about Frank Sheeran, this figure of gangster life. I mean, this existed, but for a lot of people, including me, Irishman was the big event of 2019. First, let's talk about the cons of the movie, the things that the movie does poorly, in my opinion. First of all, the big elephant in the room, the CG looks awful. Especially on Joe Pesci, for some reason, he looks plastic. Like there is something wrong, which there is something wrong. They are digitally de-aging these guys onto their old bodies. Everyone has talked about this scene where Frank Sheeran stomps on the guy's hand, and it's the body of the now old Robert De Niro with the face of a young Robert De Niro. It doesn't match. I don't understand why Scorsese didn't go the route of casting an actor who looks a little bit like Robert De Niro and Joe Pesci and Al Pacino and have them play the younger roles, but I don't know. I'm not Martin Scorsese. I think they needed to showcase their technology, but the result is not great. And the next problem, which is not a problem for me, but I can see why it would be a problem for a lot of people, is the amount of information it's trying to shove in this movie. It's trying to tell the life of one man. I understand what Scorsese was trying to do. I call this movie Martin Scorsese's Once Upon a Time in America. But the problem is with all of these characters that come and go and kind of get forgotten in the middle of it, it's hard to keep track of it. I watched the movie 3 times, and by the third time I fully understood who each character was. The third problem, and it's not that big, but it is kind of big for me, it's the music. The gangster movies usually have some great music because, well, you have the Godfather theme, you have Ennio Morricone doing that amazing poverty track for Once Upon a Time in America, you have Ennio Morricone doing another amazing track for Untouchables, and you have Martin Scorsese himself using these incredible pieces of music for Goodfellas. So why does The Irishman sound so empty? You know, it sounds like it doesn't have a voice, it doesn't have a music. I might be wrong, I might be alone at this, but it's what I think, and I just hope, I don't know, I hope Ennio Morricone could come and do a score for Irishman, because I think The Irishman needs it. Now, let's talk about the pros. What did the movie do right? First off, the acting. It's as good as one might imagine. De Niro is doing another great De Niro performance, Pacino is doing another great Pacino performance, Keitel is just there for us to see him, and that's enough. But I want to talk about 2 people in specific. One, Ray Romano. For what a little part he had, he actually managed to show himself very well. Imagine, this is the guy that's standing next to Robert De Niro and Al Pacino, yet you see him. The other one is Joe Pesci. Joe Pesci has a problem of being typecasted as the angry little Italian, which he did great for a while, but to see him so calm and calculated and...
When I ask somebody to take care of something for me, I expect them to take care of it themselves. I don't need 2 roads coming back to me.
it's a treat and it's a weird sight, and I loved every second of it. The other parts of the movie were also great. Scorsese's direction is good. It's not his best. I mean, I wouldn't call this movie as good as Taxi Driver or Gangs of New York or Goodfellas, but it's serviceable and it has some great moments.
Now, for something like this, you're gonna need two guns. The one you're gonna use and a backup.
And the movie has a great pacing. It's 3.5 hours, but it doesn't feel like 3.5 hours. It just whizzes past by. You get drawn in, and the movie has a great pace of information. It gives you everything you need to know. Characters, not very much, but story, amazing. And by the end of it, you just realize it's been 3.5 hours. It has its own universe. It sucks you in from the beginning and just keeps you there in this amazing universe. It's a great movie, it's what I'm trying to say. But what does it do in regards to gangster movies? If you see the movie Once Upon a Time in America, the main message of that movie is that gangsters are not honorable. If you watch the Goodfellas, it's gangster life doesn't pay well. If you watch a movie like Bugsy, it's that gangster life is lethal. What about The Irishman? Well, I think the best way to describe Irishman, it's by its last act. By the end of the movie, Frank Sheeran is desperate. He is miserable. He's taken down. And I think that is what Irishman trying to say. By the end of their lives, gangsters, people who worked in organized crime, they're not going to be Don Vito Corleone. They're not even going to be Michael Corleone. They're going to be Frank Sheeran, stuck in a nursing home, the family not talking to them, just waiting to die. All of their friends dead, all of their enemies dead, nobody left. The ultimate expression of loneliness. The ending of The Irishman is really heartbreaking because, well, you feel Frank Sheeran's pain. We all had days when we sit up at night and realize what this is all for. What are we doing with our lives? Why are we living? And when you get to be Frank Sheeran, who has lived that life, the question gets harder. All the people you killed, what for? You're sitting there alone. The final shot of the movie is an amazing work of direction. You see Frank Sheeran through the little crack of the door, and that's it. That's the life of a gangster. Irishman takes what Scorsese himself was trying to say, what Sergio Leone was trying to say, and just compacts it all into this one life and shows to you what it felt to be a gangster. You'll be on top of the world for 2 seconds, then a slow ride to the graveyard, where you see all of your friends die.
They're all gone. Russell, Angelo, Salerno, Pro, Dorfman, Sally Bugs, they're gone.
I don't like to use this phrase, but The Irishman shows well a life wasted. So yeah, that is kind of sad. The reason I wanted to talk about The Irishman is because, well, 2019 ended. I still haven't watched a lot of the movies that I should. I haven't watched Marriage Story. I haven't watched 1917, and they are in my list, but I want to talk about the movies that I really liked. The Lighthouse I really liked. Dolomite Is My Name I really liked. The Gentleman I really liked. But Irishman just stuck here because I was waiting for it. I was waiting for it to disappoint me. It didn't, and in the end it made me just sit in my room for hours looking at the wall thinking, what the fuck are we doing on this planet? I promised you a Don Vito Corleone impression, and here it comes. If that worked, and if that worked, I'll see you next time. Oh my god, Don Rickles does this impression of gangsters, and I think I sound like that more than I sound like Don Corleone.
That's what his guys did. They always stood around and said, "Hey, Frank, you spilled booze on him." They were all scientists.
By the way, rest in peace, Don Rickles. I watched a lot of him during the quarantine too. I might do an episode on him because I love the man.